Hello, welcome to the application support session on Welcome Corps, the private sponsorship of refugees program. My name is Ann O'Brien, and I'm joined by my colleague, Erin Tate. Both of us know from experience that groups of volunteers can do a great job welcoming and resettling refugees. We're both members of the Welcome Corps team, and we're so pleased to talk with you today about this exciting new service opportunity. This session is for people who wish to learn more details about how they can complete a welcome plan, which is part of the required process of applying to the Welcome Corps. And this welcome plan will walk you through how to literally do the services and prepare for the services required to welcome refugees through the Welcome Corps. In this session, we're going to talk about what the program is, refugees who will be supported through the program, what the key steps are, and information you'll need to consider for each part of your welcome plan to become a certified Welcome Corps group. We hope you'll leave the session feeling more knowledgeable and empowered to gather a strong group in your community, create a thorough welcome plan, and complete your application to welcome a refugee soon. There are two phases to Welcome Corps. During phase one, sponsor groups will be matched with any refugee, such as a refugee they don't know from sub-Saharan Africa or originally from Syria or anywhere around the globe. We have not yet started phase two, which is where private sponsor groups sponsor a refugee they do know, such as a family member or a colleague. We're not currently accepting applications for that phase, which is the naming phase. However, it will begin later this year, and there will be information provided to go over the details for that, which will be incorporated in an updated session of this. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. First of all, this information session will be recorded, and it's going to be sent out afterward, including screen views of the PowerPoint presentation. And given the number of participants we typically have on this application support session, we will not be answering questions. This one is actually on demand, so it's not live and you won't be able to submit questions. At the end, we will address a few of the commonly asked questions so that we're sure that those are brought up for you and it's answered. And with that, we'll get into the application support session. First of all, just so you're all aware, the Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity that was just made available this year by the U.S. government for Americans to be inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and to in turn strengthen their own communities. It's a public-private partnership that is fueled by what America represents to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. Importantly, the Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership, which means that a Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, which is part of the Department of State, has partnered with a consortium or a group of organizations that all have expertise in refugee protection, resettlement, and welcome. This consortium is led by the Community Sponsorship Hub, and it includes organizations such as Church World Service, International Rescue Committee, IRAP, or the International Refugee Assistance Project, IRIS, which is the organization that Erin Tate and I are here with. That's Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services, and Welcome.us. So as we mentioned before, there are two phases to Welcome Corps. The first phase, which is called matching, launched in January, and it will continue throughout the course of the program. That program, that part of the program, matching, is about welcoming Americans to waiting refugee families they don't yet know, but who are already approved for resettlement to the United States. The naming, or phase two, is going to start later this year, and that will allow welcoming Americans to sponsor refugees they already know. As part of this program, there will be an opportunity for sponsors and groups in the matching to be matched with a refugee already approved to come to the United States, and to include a preference criteria or affinity criteria. And how that is identified is either through the refugee's nationality or country of origin, the refugee's spoken language, or the case composition of the refugee family, including whether or not the sponsor group can manage having small children, minors, or elders within the composition of the family. We refer to this as affinity criteria, and you'll be asked for your preferences once your private sponsor group applies and is approved. The information for naming phase 2 sponsors is coming later this year. So Welcome Corps will release the naming phase 2 information by sending an email to everyone on the Welcome Corps email list. If you haven't already, go ahead and sign up using this QR code for the welcomecorps.org website, and that will lead you to where you can put in your email address to make sure that you get the updates. There are many things that we don't know until the government releases the guidelines for the naming phase. When naming phase 2 is announced, we will have updated information on the website at welcomecorps.org, as well as this application support session webinar will be updated with the details about how to apply for a specific refugee. And this will be available every Wednesday night, as well as Wednesday nights will be live, as well as on demand anytime on our website. So a commonly asked question is whether or not should naming sponsors watch this webinar. So in this webinar, we're going to explain to you the basics of the Welcome Corps application, which will not change once naming begins. So that includes things like how to form a sponsor group, required training and background checks, how much money you must raise, the research and planning you must do to create a welcome plan. So we recommend that you do watch this webinar and then watch the revised version once naming is announced. However, at this time, please do not yet apply. So don't start your application yet for naming phase 2. Your application will be rejected. So we're going to give you the information to work on your welcome plan, but don't start your application yet. And with this, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Erin Tate.
Great. Thanks, Ann. I want to talk about the training objectives for this webinar. So by the end of this training, you will be able to list the responsibilities of a PSG, list the steps necessary to become a private sponsorship group, understand how to complete a welcome plan, list what documents you need to submit as part of your private sponsorship group application, and articulate what happens after your application has been submitted. Now, we're going to go through today all of the steps you need for the application process for Welcome Corps. As you'll see, there's a lot of steps, but we know that you can complete them, and we want to provide you with good information about how to do that. Now, the first step is to form your private sponsorship group. And what does that mean? Well, let us explain. So the Welcome Corps, the basic idea of the Welcome Corps is that a group of people come together to sponsor a refugee. One person cannot sponsor a refugee through the Welcome Corps. They need a group, and they need a group of 5 people. So we call that a private sponsorship group, and here's the requirements. You need at least 5 people in your group who are U.S. citizens or U.S. legal permanent residents. They must be over the age of 18. They also need to be living in or near the community where you're going to resettle the refugee. Every one of your group members must complete a background check, which we'll talk about later. They must sign a commitment form. And your group, at least one member of your group, must complete an online course. And finally, your private sponsorship group must develop a welcome plan, which is your plan for how you're going to welcome the newcomer family. Now, whenever you're forming this welcoming group that we call the private sponsorship group, we want you to think about a few different things. First of all, think about the group size. You need at least 5 people, but you can have more. If you're sponsoring a large family, you might want more than 5 people in order to have enough people to help with all the refugees that you're going to be helping. You also want to think about roles and how that connects to skills, experiences, and connections. So for example, as we're going to be telling you later, you're going to be helping the refugees find a job. So it would be great to have in your private sponsorship group someone who knows about finding jobs, maybe somebody who works in HR or someone who knows a lot of business owners. You also want to think about maybe having someone with a medical background who can help with the refugees finding medical care. You also want to think about availability. And what that means is that refugees are going to have a lot of appointments during the day for doctor's appointments and applying for food stamps. And you want to make sure you have private sponsorship group members who are available during the day to help the refugees. If your group members are only available on the weekends, it's going to make it very difficult to resettle the refugee. And finally, we encourage you to have a diverse group. People with different backgrounds and experiences bring more strength to your group and more skills to your group. Now, when you're submitting information about your group, because you're going to need to do this whenever you apply, first of all, you need to have a unique name for your group. Make up a name. It could be Welcome to America, private sponsorship group. It could be Welcome to Houston, private sponsorship group, whatever name you decide. You also will need to provide the full contact information for all your group members. You'll need to make sure that each group member is 18 years old or older. You're going to need to make sure each group member lives in or near the same community. That means that they need to live in less than 30 minutes away from wherever the refugee is going to be living. Each group member, make sure they're a citizen or a legal permanent resident. Make sure you're going to have a group leader who will fill out the application. They will be the primary point of contact, but you also want to think about having an alternate. And lastly, if you have a private sponsorship organization, make sure you put that on your application if you already have one. If you don't, that's also fine. Lastly, I want to mention, how do you find a group? If you're not sure how to find a group, here's some suggestions. Reach out to family, friends, neighbors, your local faith community, local clubs like Rotary Club or YMCA. You can talk to people at your job or talk to former refugees and immigrants in your community, or perhaps use an online platform like Facebook or Meetup. We believe that if you talk to people in your neighborhood, in your community, you will find a group of 5 people who are interested in sponsoring a refugee and bringing a refugee to your community. I want to talk next about how you're actually going to start your online application. Now, when you want to apply, you need to create a Welcome Corps account. You will go to the Welcome Corps website and click Apply. And then one person, the leader of your group, should create an account. The email address that the leader enters here will be the email address that we will use all the time when Welcome Corps wants to communicate with you. So make sure it's an email address that you are checking regularly. After you create your account, you'll need to put in your first name, last name, email, city, zip code, and your phone number. You will get a registration code to your email, a verification code that you'll need to enter on the website. And once you do that, you will get to this, your Welcome Corps application dashboard. Here you will be able to start a new application, or you'll be able to go to an existing application. And as you'll see here, it also goes through 1, 2, 3, the steps that you need to do to apply. And it also gives you the option to attend an application support session, which you're already watching right now. All right, now I'm going to turn over to Anne to talk about background checks.
Great. So a key component of the Welcome Corps program at the very basic is that each member of the Welcome Corps private sponsor group are going to need to complete a background check. And you can't do it for everybody. Each person has to do it. So in order to complete the background checks, you need to click on the link on the Welcome Corps website to be directed to a section of an organization called Sterling Volunteers website that has been dedicated to Welcome Corps. Each PSG member, private sponsorship group member, must register themselves on the Sterling Volunteers website. The name and contact information that you enter on the Sterling Volunteers website must match your legal identification. So don't use nicknames like Bobby for Robert, because that's not your legal name. It needs to match whatever your legal identification is. Also, the name and contact information must match the name and contact information that your group leader enters on the PSG application, because we're going to need on the back end with the Welcome Corps organization, we're going to need to match up those background checks to your PSG application. So make sure the names are the same. The cost is approximately $15 per background check, and that needs to be paid by the individual PSG member as they're going through their background check with Sterling Volunteers. PSG members will then be notified by Sterling Volunteers via email when the background checks have been cleared. So PSG group leader, you're going to want to get those from your PSG members, because your application won't be approved until all of those are completed. So you're going to ask your people to send them to you. The next part of the application process is the online course and knowledge check. This is really important training. A lot of thought has been put into it, and at least one member of the group is going to have to do that. We highly recommend that all members do it. The online course can be found on the welcomecorps.org website under resources. And as I mentioned, at least one member must complete it. However, we strongly recommend that all 5 members of the group complete the course. Even if you have been a former refugee yourself, there's key information that is new that you're going to need to be aware of in order to successfully resettle the newcomers that are coming. Also, if you're part of a private sponsor group that has not been refugees formally themselves, you're going to need to complete the online course, ideally all the members, so that the knowledge isn't on just the leader of the group. There are also important group discussions throughout the course, and you're going to want to do this as a group so that everybody understands the direction you're going with the family. When passed, you're going to receive a certificate, and that certificate must be uploaded as part of the application process. So when you get your completed certificate back via email, be sure to hold on to it for when you complete your application. The online course and knowledge check covers different types of content that we have found over the years is really important for the private sponsor groups to know. Sponsorship 101 covers the basics in terms of ensuring what services you need to help the family to do, as well as how you need to help them with it. Key mindsets, that section of the training addresses understanding the view that you're taking with the family. Things like, you're not doing things for the family, you're doing things with them. The entire goal of refugee resettlement is to give the family control of their lives back. And in order to do that, everybody in the group really has to understand that you're not adopting the family, that you're not doing things for them, that you're teaching them how to take on their lives independently within the United States. So there's a lot of that that's discussed in terms of the key mindset section, as well as in the group discussions. You're going to want to pause the training when you get there and get your group together to talk through those group discussions. The last 2 areas include support area deep dives, so more detailed information about things like employment, documentation that you need to help the refugees to acquire so that you have additional information to help the resettlement process go well. And then onwards and upwards is a fun way to talk about how you begin separating yourselves from the family so that they can stand on their own. If everybody in the group, particularly the leader, but really everybody, doesn't have the end goal in mind, which is for the family to stand on their own, then it can be more difficult. And everybody needs to be thinking about that with each step that they're working on with the family. In everything that you take on, you want to have a view to how are they going to do this independently in the future. So once you've completed the online course and knowledge check, the next part is going to be developing your welcome plan. And we're going to step you through all of those different elements of it. Erin, you want to take this?
Yes, I do. So the welcome plan is the most important part of your application because it shows how your PSG will make sure the refugee gets the services and support they need. If your welcome plan is not complete or strong enough, your welcome core application will be rejected. Now, how are you going to complete the welcome plan? Well, first of all, you're going to download the welcome plan document from the application portal after you've created your account. It's a PDF document. Make sure that you read all the instructions in the welcome plan, and then you're going to research what services are available in your community. You're going to plan how you can support the refugee when they arrive to the United States. In the welcome plan, you're also going to agree to provide the required services and support. You're going to list and describe your plans to welcome. You're going to develop a budget for the cost. And as you do this, you're going to check the boxes and fill in the blanks in the welcome plan until you have a plan and you know what you're going to do when the refugee arrives. This is what the welcome plan is going to look like when you download it. As I said, it's a PDF, and you're going to fill this out, save it, and upload it. Now, the welcome plan includes your plans to resettle the refugee into your community, and that includes welcoming the refugees after a long trip, providing a clean, safe, affordable home, helping them get essential documentation, navigate the public benefit application process, help the refugees get the health care they need, provide ways to learn English, arrange interpretation and translation support, help them adjust to the norms of the United States, help them find a job, help them enroll in school, and provide financial support for 90 days. Now, refugees that come to the United States that are not part of the Welcome Corps go through a local refugee resettlement agency. And these are the same services that a local refugee resettlement agency provides to refugees. But in Welcome Corps, what's so amazing about this program is that your sponsor group is the resettlement agency. You act like the resettlement agency, and so you're going to provide all the same services. And that's why we're going to go through the details of these services. I'm going to talk about the first one, welcoming the refugees after a long trip. You will greet the refugees at the airport and you will transport them to initial housing. As you're thinking about how you're going to do this, make sure you have a vehicle that's big enough and has enough seats and space for luggage based on the size of the family that you're sponsoring. Make sure that you have car seating and car seats and child seats for any children and young people that will be part of the refugee family. Make sure you have language interpretation. It's so important that when refugees arrive to the United States, that they're greeted by somebody who speaks their own language so they can feel safe and comfortable getting in the car with people that they've just met. Finally, make sure you have a backup plan in case the person who's planning to go to the airport gets sick or has some kind of problem with their car. Now, this is what the welcome plan looks like. I've provided a snapshot here. And as you can see, there are 2 checks and one box that's not been checked yet. So in your welcome plan, what you're going to do is you're going to read these instructions and you will see 3 boxes, and you are going to click each box until each box becomes a check mark. And by doing that, you're agreeing to provide the item that is indicated by that box. You're promising that a sponsor group member will greet the refugee at the airport and transport them to initial housing. You're agreeing and promising that the sponsor group will ensure there is language interpretation available. And finally, you're going to promise that the sponsor group will ensure that transportation includes a car seat and booster seats for the children. So this is to give you an example. We want to make sure you see the welcome plan and what it looks like. So once you download it and start filling it out, you have an idea what it looks like. Now I'm going to turn it over to Anne to talk about the next step.
Great. So the next step is something that really requires a lot of thought and a lot of work on your part as the private sponsor group members. You're going to need to provide a safe, clean, affordable home. And you're going to need to secure that housing for at least the 90-day sponsorship period. However, as you do your research, you're going to find that the majority of the landlords nowadays want to have a 1-year lease. So you're going to need to get out there and start talking to landlords in the particular area where you plan to resettle the family. You're going to need to select housing while considering the following elements: temporary versus permanent housing. So obviously you could provide temporary housing for the first 30 or 60 days, depending upon the situation and whoever has a temporary housing setting. But you're also going to need to do a fair amount of research regarding the costs of permanent housing in the welcoming community. You're going to need to look at rental rates and ask the details about security deposits. If it's been a while since you rented an apartment, then you're going to find that security deposits are now 2 or 3 months worth of rent. You're also going to need to identify location and access to buses, employment, schools, etc. Remember that the idea is to give the refugee family or the new refugees the ability to control their own lives, which means they need to have ready access to employment, the local schools, and otherwise. There's also a tip sheet on the website called the Housing Tip Sheet, which is a link within the welcome plan. We highly recommend that you read that and think through it thoroughly in order to make sure you have a solid plan in place for providing the type of housing that they're going to need when they arrive. Additionally, you're going to need to make sure that you make a plan for how you're going to furnish this housing, whether it's temporary housing or permanent housing. You're going to need to think about, based upon the size of the family and the size of apartments that you think that they'll need and can afford. You're going to have to make a plan to gather furniture from all the different rooms, whether it's bedrooms, whether it's the kitchen, the furniture for the living room and otherwise. That's a great way to get things donated, but you need to make a plan for it and create a list. Also, you need to research the utilities for the different apartments, electricity, water, and gas, to find out what the costs are going to be in order to build a solid budget for the refugee families when they come. You're also going to need a plan to make sure that each adult in the family has their own cell phone. Of course, you would think that they might come with them, but those aren't going to work once they get here immediately. So you need to research the most cost-effective cell phone plan. And of course, clothing for every season. And while you can get a lot of this donated, you're not going to know up front what the size of the family or what the sizes of the individuals are. But you could probably get some of the things donated in terms of some winter coats and otherwise. But you're going to need to create a budget for this. As well, if you're planning on receiving a family that has children, you're going to need to make a plan for who will collect the baby and children's items if they do have children. So on the welcome plan, you'll see that there is a link with additional information to provide training and otherwise by Refugee Housing Solutions. And that includes initial information as you're doing your research, as well as the housing tip sheet. You'll also see that you need to think through, and the boxes have been checked, that your group will be considering the following when securing housing: the proximity and availability of housing in the community, the affordability to ensure refugees can pay for the rent and utilities on their own at the end of the 90-day period, the cost of the security deposit, and access to the public transportation. You're also going to be confirming that the sponsor group will make sure that the home is clean, safe, and affordable. One of those things that you need to consider in terms of clean, safe, and affordable is whether or not there is, for example, lead in the home, and whether or not you have said that you're going to be welcoming young children. So those are some of the things you need to think about as you look at the housing and whether or not it's clean, safe, and affordable. So help them getting essential documentation. These are all these things that you might be taking for granted if you were born in the United States or you moved here a long time ago, but there is key essential documentation that they're going to need in order to get their life started. This includes helping them get their employment authorization document. The refugees will come with automatic access to employment in the U.S. However, they need this document, the employment authorization document, to be able to show employers. The employers are most comfortable seeing this document. It will have been applied for already when they were coming from overseas. However, we're dealing with government systems. So guess what? It's going to be a little bit delayed. So you're going to need to do some research in terms of how to follow up on it. The same thing with the Social Security card. They're going to need one. And while ideally that will have been applied for before they left to come to the United States, again, these are new government systems, and you're going to need to help them follow up on it, as well as getting a state ID card or a driver's license. You can't guarantee that they're going to automatically be able to take a driver's license test because their English level might not be sufficient, or the driver's license test might not be offered in their language within your state. So you're going to need to research and identify getting a state ID card. Also, there is a thing called the AR-11, a change of address form that the U.S. government requires refugees to fill out within 10 days of when they make any change in their home address. So if you're putting them in temporary housing and then moving them to a permanent apartment, you're going to need to do the AR-11 as soon as that happens, because the U.S. government needs to be able to send them information as they progress in their resettlement. So they need to know the current mailing address. And last but absolutely not least, you're going to help them register for selective service if it's a male aged 18 to 25. This is really important because it impacts their path to citizenship if it's not completed. So on the welcome plan part of the welcome plan that pertains to essential documentation, you're going to see that you need to check some boxes stating that you understand that you have reviewed the USCIS and US Postal Service change of address form and that you agree to submit it when the refugees move. And you're also stating by checking on the box that you are going to help them register for selective service if they are males aged 18 to 25. You're going to need to check the box that you've reviewed that form and that you're aware of it. Also, that each adult refugee should get a state ID and/or driver's license. This process is different in every state, so you're going to need to, before you check the box, make sure that you've done the research and that you acknowledge that your sponsor group is going to assist them in doing this. Each adult refugee will also have an arrival departure card that indicates that they are legally admitted to the United States. You'll need to assist them in obtaining this record, which is an I-94 from the Department of Homeland Security website. So you're going to check the box that your sponsor group will assist them in obtaining their I-94.
Thanks, Anne. And now I want to talk about the next section, which is about navigating the public benefits application process. You will need to guide the refugees through the process of getting any public benefits for which they're eligible. And the great thing is that refugees are eligible for public benefits. And some of those benefits include SNAP, which is also formerly known as food stamps, refugee cash assistance, which is called RCA, or temporary assistance for needy families, which is called TANF. Also Medicaid or refugee Medicaid, as well as the WIC program for women, infants, and children. And finally, Social Security income. Now, in order to help the refugees to apply, and in order to complete your welcome plan, you're going to need to do some research. And this is one of the first sections of the welcome plan where specific research is clearly required. You need to research, where will the people apply? What are the office locations? What are the websites where refugees can apply? If you need help finding these locations, you can look for information from United Way's 211 telephone number or from the USA Hello Find Hello app. Now, here again, we see a sample of the welcome plan, but here you'll notice that instead of just checking a box, we're asking you for specific information. In the welcome plan, you must list websites and office locations where the refugee will apply for public benefits. We see in this example, Medicaid. Where can the refugees apply for Medicaid? List websites and office locations. And here we've written a sample. A sample response could be Health and Human Services Department office. And here's the website address, 1234 Main Street, Anytown, Ohio. Where can the refugees apply for refugee medical assistance? List the websites and office locations there. And you'll see once again, we've listed a location. In this case, the place where you apply for Medicaid and refugee medical assistance is the same office, but you need to check in your community whether each of these places is going to be the same location or different. Now, speaking of Medicaid and healthcare, another very important thing is, where will the refugees get healthcare? You are going to help the refugees get the healthcare that they need. And once again, you need to do some research and to find out where the refugee can go for medical care. This includes the initial refugee health screening, which is a health screening that's required by the U.S. Refugee Program and must be or should be done ideally within 30 days of the arrival. It's completed at specific healthcare clinics in each state. And if you're not sure how to find the clinic, you can contact the state refugee health coordinator to find the clinic. Now, in addition, you're also going to do some research for your welcome plan and find where the refugees can go for a primary doctor or a clinic that accepts Medicaid, a federally qualified healthcare center, a dentist that accepts Medicaid or is not too expensive, a pharmacy that accepts Medicaid, and also a mental health care doctor or clinic, preferably one with experience serving refugees. Once again, I want to show you an example, because here again in the welcome plan, you will need to list specific names of doctors and clinics. For example, it asks here, list websites and local office locations for the initial medical health screening. And here we have an example: Family Health Clinic, 333 Springfield Street, Anytown, Ohio. It also asks us to list one primary care provider that will accept new patients with Medicaid or refugee medical assistance. And we've listed an example: Dr. Sarah Hassan, Legacy Healthcare Clinic, 555 West Street, Anytown, Ohio. In the welcome plan, it's going to ask you for more details about more different kinds of medical providers, and make sure you complete them all. Here, once again, I'm just giving you a sample. Now I want to turn it over to Anne to talk about providing ways to learn English.
Great. So as part of the welcome plan and as part of the resettlement of this new refugee family, you definitely need to help them get connected to English classes as soon as possible. It's going to really have a huge impact on their success in the United States. So you're going to do research in advance to identify classes that are accessible to them, either online or in person. We highly recommend that you look for in-person classes, as online may or may not be accessible to somebody that has low levels of English to begin with. And informal language learning through conversation practice. When you're selecting classes, you need to think about the times and locations of the classes, as well as childcare for refugees who are parents. This is a key service that you can provide to the family if people can take care of the children while they're attending English classes. Also, ideally, you want to access classes that are reasonable for them to get to on their own, so they're not dependent upon your group to get to them after the initial sponsorship period. Whether online or in-person classes are better for the refugee, you're not going to know that until you meet them and understand what their capabilities are and their comfort level with the online. So you really need to lean towards finding in-person classes, with online being a backup option or an additional support. Also, the cost of the classes. You really want to research anything that is free or very, very low cost. And depending upon the municipality or the city or town you live in, it may not be right there in town. Your town may have contracted with a closer by city to provide this service. But if you do the research, virtually every single town in the United States has some type of access to English language learning classes. So once you do that wonderful research, and it's super fun because you get to find out about new things in your community, you're going to need to list the website and office location of the English class or classes in your community that you're helping to help them to access. So for example, here we've given you an excerpt from the welcome plan where we've provided an example that's outlined in yellow. We want to literally know the address, the name of the organization, their address, and the website so that we can check to see if there actually are English classes that are available in the community or close by to the community that where you're helping to relocate the family to. Also, you're going to need to arrange for interpreting and translation support. And a big spoiler alert, Google Translate is not sufficient. It's simply not going to work. So you're going to have to do some legwork here. If you don't speak the language, the refugee's native language, you're going to need to arrange for professional language interpretation. Quality interpretation and translation is absolutely crucial anytime you're communicating with the refugees, and also when you're helping them to communicate with other services in their town. So professional interpretation is very important when discussing things like medical care and finances. While a lot of the federally qualified health clinics you might find will provide interpretation services right there in the clinic, they're not going to have that available when you're trying to explain to them at their home how to access their own finances in terms of their benefits and otherwise. So you want to do that research in advance to try to find, ideally, some interpreters that speak the different languages that you're thinking about welcoming from in terms of the community within the nearby community. Keep in mind that children under 18 within the family should never be used as interpreters. They don't have the life experience to be able to handle the financial and otherwise information that you're trying to get the adults to understand and take responsibility for. And also, there will be certain situations where the children need not to be involved in adult conversations. And so you cannot rely upon using the children as interpreters. So in terms of arranging that interpretation and translation support, things to consider. And you can contact people in your community who speak the languages of the refugee. You can literally reach out to different mosques, reach out to different faith communities, diaspora groups, to be able to identify people who are willing to volunteer. You will be amazed. Once you start getting in contact with leaders in these groups, you start contacting college professors, particularly community colleges as well. Once the word gets out that you are part of a group that you're looking to resettle a refugee family, people want to help, and particularly if they have connections to the countries that you're looking to welcome from. So don't be shy, get out there, start talking it up, and say that you need interpreters in these 5 languages, and start making some phone calls and emails to folks. You'll find people that want to volunteer. Or you can also supplement with hiring an in-person interpreter through a local company if that's an option as well, and if you got the fundraising to do that. For phone interpretation, you can also, by phone interpretation, we mean accessing interpreters via your smartphone. You can use a phone app like Targemly, which provides live translation over the phone for a small monthly fee. So literally it's a subscription that you set up and an app on your phone. And then depending upon the subscription level, you can make even appointments to access a live interpreter in many different languages. Or you can reach out to different interpretation companies like Global Interpreters and a few others to see how much it would cost per minute to have an interpreter that way. You can only use the phone app Google Translate for very, very basic communication, like trying to find the word for a particular food or whatever the situation is. But it's not very reliable, and not all refugees can actually read in their language. Some of them may be pre-literate, so you can't depend upon Google Translate. You're going to need to make plans for accessing interpreters. And as you would expect, we want to hear about the research and what you've decided and what you found in your welcome plan. So this provides an example of that sample of that part of the welcome plan, where you're going to write down either the name of a paid interpretation company or service that you're going to access and that you have booked that service. And if you plan to use a phone app for informal spoken interpretation, write the name of the app and what you'll be using it for.
Thanks, Anne. Next, I want to talk about helping the refugees adjust to the norms of the United States. And one of the great things about sponsoring a refugee who comes to the United States is introducing refugees to their new home, their new community, and life in the United States. And as you help them with this adjustment, there's a lot of conversations you want to have. There's a lot of orientation you want to give them. That includes discussing topics like home and personal safety, discussing with them the items in their house to make sure everything is safe, and talking about personal safety. Is it safe for them to go to the store at 10 o'clock at night? What should they do to make sure their children are safe, for example? You also need to be talking with them about their rights, responsibilities, and the laws in the United States, because every country, of course, has its own laws, and you want to make sure they understand the United States laws as well as responsibilities such as paying your taxes. You also want to orient them to the public transportation system in your community and important community locations, such as food stores, pharmacies, the library, and things like that. You also want to give them an orientation about employment, about things like banking, and about managing their money. Finally, you want to make sure that you provide them information about organizations that provide ongoing community services, such as food banks, rental assistance organizations, and organizations that they could turn to after you're done sponsoring them when they just need a little bit of help. So these are all very important parts of the United States culture that you need to make sure that you are educating them about. Now, in addition, there's some really fun things and that we also want you to introduce them to. And that includes introducing them to schools and libraries, colleges and community colleges, places of learning, places where they can go to read a book, or in the case of a library, they can access the internet, and a place where they can learn more about the world, the community around them. Secondly, parks, natural areas, and places for outdoor recreation, sports, and family fun activities. This is one of the great things about our country, is how many beautiful parks and natural areas we have. And we hope that you will introduce the refugees to those areas so they can get outside and enjoy the beauty of our country. Third, think about community events, festivals, and celebrations. Whether it's a musical event at the park or whether it's a 4th of July festival or celebration, all these kinds of community events are really great ways for refugees to get out of their home and experience what it's like to be part of the community. Also connected to this is introducing them to American and local holidays, 4th of July, Memorial Day, Thanksgiving. These are great celebrations, and they're great ways to share some of our cultures and culture and our customs. Now, in addition to these things, you also want to be introducing them to ethnic grocery stores, shops, and neighborhoods. If it's a refugee from Africa, look for a grocery store that may have food from Africa that the refugee might really enjoy shopping at. Maybe there's clothing stores. For example, if a family is from Asia, there may be specific shops that provide clothing that's familiar to people from Asia or from anywhere else. And then the third, or the final thing I mentioned here is what we call diaspora or ethnic community groups, as well as religious communities, such as churches, mosques, synagogues, temples. If you have a refugee, for example, from the Congo, do some research and find out if there's a Congolese community organization in your community. And then when the refugee arrives, ask them if they're interested to meet people from the Congo. Same thing with religious communities. Wait until the refugee arrives and ask them if they're interested to be connected with a religious community. You should never assume that a refugee definitely wants to meet people from their ethnic group or from their religious community, because everybody makes their own decision. But do some research, reach out, and then when the refugee arrives, let them know these community groups exist in our community. These religious communities exist, and give them the option of how they want to connect. Now, for the welcome plan, you will have a checkbox that you will need to check that where you say that your sponsor group confirms that you will provide and orient the refugee around these topics that we have just talked about. Next, I want to talk about finding a refugee a job. Of course, having a job in the United States is very important, and refugees are eligible to work when they arrive using their I-94 document. Now, you as a sponsor group are going to help them find a job. This includes helping them prepare for a job search by teaching them how to find a job and how to keep a job in your community. You also need to teach them about workplace culture, norms, and rules. You need to help them develop short-term and long-term job goals. Of course, the first job they get in the United States is not going to be the perfect job, but they are going to have their short-term goals and then their long-term goals of where they want to be in 5 or 10 years. You also need to connect them with workforce development programs that exist in your community. You can help them prepare a resume and or complete applications, and you can help them practice doing interviews. In addition, you will need to help the refugees find and apply to specific jobs. You will need to research employers who may hire newly arrived refugees. You need to think about employers that your PSG has a connection to. Maybe somebody in your group works at Target and knows the person hiring there, or maybe somebody who you know is a manager at Walmart or one of the some other store. Think about where you have connections. Also look for jobs near where the refugee will live or accessible by public transportation. Remember that you will find jobs for all adult refugees. This includes women, men, young adults, and older adults. So think about jobs that are suitable for a variety of individuals. And lastly, as I said, to repeat, look for jobs that are suitable for a variety of individuals. That also means different English skills. People that speak not much English to people that speak a lot of English. I know you may think it's impossible for a refugee who doesn't speak English to find a job. Well, we can tell you from experience that it can be done. There are lots of employers who will hire people who are willing to work hard, even if their English is not strong. But look for jobs with different English levels, also different education levels, and also different physical abilities. Now, in your welcome plan, you're going to be asked to list a few things. First, we're going to ask you to list workforce development services available in your community. You see my example here, Northern Workforce Development Center and New Start Employment Program. And then secondly, you're also going to list employers in your community that your sponsor group has a connection with, and that may hire refugees. And here you see I've listed an example: Hanover Hotel, Mountain Valley Manufacturing, and Aladdin Halal Store. These are made up examples, but these are actually some clues for you. What we found is that a lot of refugees find their first jobs in hotels, in small manufacturing plants, and also in retail stores. So think about looking in your community in those places. And finally, you're going to check a box that says you will help the refugee with resume preparation, interview practice, brainstorming employers, and applying for jobs. Next, I want to talk about enrolling children in school, which is my favorite thing to do when we're welcoming a refugee to the United States, because you will have the amazing honor and joy of helping refugee children and youth under 18 years to enroll in school. It's a beautiful moment because it's when you see the future of this family. You see this child getting an education, and you can imagine all the great things they're going to do in their future. Now, when you go to register them in school, make sure the children have the required vaccines and documents before you go to enroll them in school, so that the day they go to enroll, everything goes smoothly. Check to make sure if your school district has special programs for refugee and immigrant children. who are new to the United States. Many school districts do. Also look for Head Start, Early Start, and other preschool programs. And while you're at it, thinking about options for the children, identify free or low-cost childcare programs. In the Welcome Core, in the Welcome Core application and the Welcome Plan, you're going to be asked to check this box where it says our sponsor group confirms that if we're sponsoring refugees that are under 18 years old, we will help them enroll in school. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Anne to talk about the last few sections of our welcome plan.
Great. So these are really important sections. We need to make thorough plans for providing financial support for at least 90 days. You're going to need to provide each refugee with the basic financial support during the sponsorship period of at least 90 days. We say 90 days because it also depends upon how quickly their benefits get approved. However, you need to plan for at least the minimum, which is $2,425 per refugee. This financial support must include cash and may include donated materials or services such as furniture or housing. But you need to create a detailed budget of all the costs that it will take to resettle a family depending upon the size that you have indicated. Monthly costs such as rent, utilities, etc., and one-time costs such as setting up the utilities, security deposits, buying furniture, household items, clothing, food. As we talked about earlier, when you take them to apply for the food stamp program and the cash assistance, that can take many months to come into play. So you need to make sure you provide an adequate budget to cover those costs until they can access their benefits. Also, you're going to need to do a fair amount of research in terms of the things that they're going to need. So, as we mentioned, researching furniture that can get donated to reduce the amount of cash you have to spend on things like that, who can collect and store those things for you, and then adding up the total cost to determine the amount of financial support you will need for the first 90 days. While we indicate that you must provide at least a minimum of $2,425 per refugee, our best estimate is that it's going to cost more than that, depending upon the security deposits and the rent and utility costs in your local area. So this is the amount that you're going to need to fundraise to support the refugees you're sponsoring after you develop the detailed budget. So on that section of the welcome plan, you need to calculate your sponsor group's estimated expenses for at least the first 90 days. Again, we say at least the first 90 days because you need to take into account how quickly the benefits become accessible and how long it might take them to get employed. So what is the maximum refugee family group size your group is prepared to support? An example is 4. You're going to need to multiply that number by the minimum of 2,425 to identify the total that you have to raise. And then what is the total financial requirement? That's the amount that you're going to put into that box. You're going to need to raise at least 60% of the above total before submitting this application. And we want you in your welcome plan to document the estimated living costs for at least those first 90 days. So what is the average cost of the rent in your area, including housing or security deposits for the maximum family size for at least 3 months? You may find, as an example, that in and of itself is $6,000. So it could be $2,000 to $3,000 a month for depending on the family size. And the landlords, after you do your research, you may find that the landlords are expecting 2 to 3 months deposit to put down. We need you to do that research and indicate the dollar amount that you're going to have to provide upfront for housing security deposits. Also, the average costs of utilities in your area, including hookup fees, initial down payments, and then multiply that by at least 3 in order to estimate what those initial utilities will be. As well, the average cost of phone and internet bills for a maximum family size of 3 months. So again, keep in mind that if you're going to welcome a family, or any type of a family composition that includes multiple adults, you need to plan on providing a cell phone plan for each of those adults. Then you're going to need to add up the numbers above in order to arrive at the minimum total cost for sponsoring them for at least the first 90 days. If you are finding, for example, that it is taking in your state a month or two to get cash assistance started, you're going to want to add in additional funds that go above that total in order to come up with an accurate budget of how much you need to fundraise. So if your total budget amount listed in question 6 is more than the amount you have raised, you're going to need to describe how you will ensure that you have adequate funds for supporting the refugees. And you need to put those details in your welcome plan.
Thanks, Ann.
Yeah.
Let me I'm going to talk about the commitment form, beginning the fundraising, and then we're almost done. We'll talk about submitting your application. So we finished talking about the welcome plan. You've got that done. You've completed it. And now there's just 2 more steps, both very important. One is there is a commitment form. And the commitment form makes sure that what you are doing is you're committing to be part of this group. And every group member must sign the commitment form. And there's also a code of conduct document that every group member also must sign. So having every group member sign the code of conduct and the commitment form is important. You'll upload that as part of your application. Now let's talk about beginning fundraising. Now, as Ann mentioned, obviously you will need to raise funds to sponsor a refugee through the Welcome Corps. You're going to use this money to pay for what the refugee needs when they arrive. In total, you'll need to raise $2,425 per refugee. And your sponsor group will hold these funds until the refugee arrives. After the refugee arrives, you will spend this money to help the refugee. Now, of course, as Ann mentioned, you may need more than $2,425 per refugee, depending on the cost of living in your community and the family size. Now, before you submit your application, you must raise 60% of the total amount required. This turns out to be $1,455 per refugee. And in order for your application to be approved, you must submit evidence with your application that you've raised 60%. Your evidence can be a bank statement, a letter from a faith-based organization, foundation, or nonprofit, or a GoFundMe screenshot. And let's talk more about that. Now, there's 3 different ways you can collect money for the Welcome Corps project. And one option is that you can collect the money and put it in a bank account. That's pretty simple, right? Now, if you are holding funds in a bank account, then you must submit a bank statement as part of your application. When you do that, you need to make sure that the funds in the bank account are only used for this project. Secondly, you need to make sure that the private sponsorship name must be listed on the account as the account nickname or name. So what that means is you can either go to your bank and say, I want to set up a group bank account with my PSG name. So for example, Welcome to America PSG. Or some banks that will allow you to create a nickname for your account. Make sure the nickname shows up on the statement and the nickname is your PSG. Now, personal accounts that do not have the sponsorship group name listed as the nickname are not accepted. I cannot submit my personal bank account statement that says Aaron Tate because that does not prove that I'm holding the money for the refugee. Personal bank accounts that are used for other purposes are not accepted. Finally, make sure that your bank statement includes the name of the financial institution or bank. And finally, make sure that the total fund balance includes at least the minimum of that 60%, which is $1,455 per refugee. Next, let's talk about another option. So some people like to partner with a nonprofit organization and ask a nonprofit organization to hold the funds for your private sponsorship group. And that's fine as well. The nonprofit organization, maybe it's a faith community, maybe it's a local mosque or church or temple or synagogue, or maybe it's a faith-based organization. It could also be a foundation or a nonprofit organization. Now, if any of these kinds of nonprofit organizations are holding the funds for you, then you must provide a letter from the organization stating the total amount of money they're holding for the private sponsorship group. So, for example, they could send a letter that says, "To whom it may concern, our mosque is holding $10,532 for the Welcome to America PSG to resettle a refugee here in Houston, Texas." And you could submit that letter as part of your application. Now, the third option is you can raise funds through an online website, GoFundMe. When you set up the GoFundMe account, be sure your private sponsorship group name is listed on the donations page. And if you're holding funds in GoFundMe, then you must submit a screenshot of your GoFundMe page showing the total amount raised by the private sponsorship group. Now, a few fundraising tips. How to raise money? Well, first of all, engage your community in fundraising. Ask your family, your friends, your coworkers. Ask faith communities and other organizations. Make sure you check out the Welcome Corps fundraising guide on our website for more ideas. And finally, I want to make a note that Welcome Corps does not monitor who donates to the project, and we do not require all PSG members to contribute funds. We think that every member of your private sponsorship group will contribute something. Some will contribute money, some will contribute time, and some will contribute both. But we want to let you know that we do not require every group member to contribute money, but we do know that each one will give of their time. Now, I want to talk about what's going to happen when you submit your application. You're going to submit your application online. Now, before I talk about submitting an application, I want to talk again to those of you who are interested in phase 2 naming. If you are interested in naming phase 2 sponsors, I want to remind you what application steps you can do now. Because as we said, naming phase 2 has not begun yet. But here's what you can do now. You can go ahead and do your background checks. You can go ahead and do the Community Essentials training and get the certificate. You can also, if you want, begin fundraising. And you can also start researching and planning how you will provide resettlement services and complete your welcome plan. However, things you should not do now before naming has begun: do not complete the welcome plan document, because we're actually going to have a new document for naming, which will be a little bit different. However, you can go ahead and read the document to help with the planning. Also, do not apply to the Welcome Corps. Your application will be rejected and it will cause challenges for you. And lastly, I want to mention, right now, we cannot guarantee that the refugee you want to bring to the United States will be eligible for the program. So whenever we release the information about naming phase 2, we will have on our website information about what refugees can come through Welcome Corps. So you have to decide. It's your decision how many things you want to do before you know whether the person is able to come to the United States. You may want to go ahead and do fundraising, or you may not want to do fundraising. It's your decision, because it is possible that you could raise money and do all this work, and the refugee that you want to sponsor is not eligible to come. So the day that we release the naming phase 2 guidelines, we will release information on our website where you'll be able to see if a refugee is eligible. Now, after you submit your application, here's what's going to happen. Your application will be reviewed by trained Welcome Corps team members. After review, your application may be approved, it may be pending, and the PSG will be notified to complete additional tasks, or it could be denied. Now, how will you know? you need to check your application dashboard for updates and notifications. You may receive notifications about additional tasks you need to do to complete your application. If you get a task, respond immediately and complete the task by the due date provided by Welcome Corps. If you do not complete a task by the due date, your application will go to the back of the line. So here's what your application dashboard is going to look like after you've applied. And you can see here the blue circle, it says application under review. And it says the private sponsorship group name, Welcome to Anytown PSG. Over here in red, you see the tasks. And you see that there's a task required with urgent attention. You click on that to find out what it is you need to do. You will also see a little bell up here with notifications, just like you see notifications on Facebook, Instagram, and any other website. You will see up here notifications, messages of something you need to do. When you see those notifications, click on them. When you click on them, you'll see something that looks like this. There'll be a message from Welcome Corps. There'll be a due date. There'll be a place you can upload files and a place you can mark complete. So for example, you might get a message that says, we did not receive the background check for one of your PSG members. Please upload the background check for Aaron Tate. And if the due date, and then you'll have a due date, you can upload the files, mark it complete, and it will be sent to Welcome Corps. You might get a message that says, your welcome plan is not complete. Please fill out the information under where you will help them go to see a doctor. You can upload the new welcome plan by the due date. Very important that you're keeping an eye on this. Also, make sure you're checking your email for notifications from Welcome Corps. Emails will be sent to the email address used to register the PSG account. Remember, the PSG leaders set up the PSG account, and that's where all the emails are going to go. Now, the emails will tell you to go back to the application dashboard, and any information you need, you will do it through the application dashboard, not through email. After your application is approved, what will happen? Well, what will happen is, I apologize. Excuse me. After your application is approved, your PSG will be assigned to a private sponsorship group. And when a private sponsorship group is an organization that will help you throughout the process. Your PSG will be assigned to a private sponsorship organization, and your private sponsorship organization will give you more information and support on next steps. After you're approved, you'll receive a survey that will help us match you with a refugee family. This survey includes information about your PSG group and community. Also, it's an opportunity for you to notify us of any affinity criteria preferences that you have, such as the refugee's country of origin, languages spoken by the refugees, or the family composition, including if they have children or elders. Also, then your PSG will be matched with a refugee, and the refugee will arrive to your community. After the refugee arrives, your PSG will provide all the support and services that you described in the welcome plan. You will utilize the funds that you raise to support the refugee. You will receive ongoing support and guidance from your private sponsorship organization, and you will get reminders regarding required 30 and 90-day reports and 6 and 12-month surveys. Thank you for sponsoring refugees through the Welcome Corps. And lastly, we want to tell you that if you need additional help with the application process, you've got two options. If you were already connected to a private sponsorship organization, then connect with them and contact them, and they'll help you with the application. Private sponsorship organizations are refugee organizations across the country that are experts in helping people like you apply to the Welcome Corps. If you do not have a private sponsorship organization, you can sign up for a one-on-one meeting with a Welcome Corps team member. And you can use this QR code here on the screen. You can take a photo of it, or you can go to the website we've listed here, calendly.com/welcome corps, and you can sign up to speak to one of our team members and have a one-on-one Zoom meeting to ask them any questions you have about the application process. All right. Well, Anne, I believe with that, we've covered everything there is about the application process. Anything else you would like to add before we wrap up?
Just wanted to note that there are a couple of common questions that have come up that are really key to completing your application. And one of those questions is, can I form a group of 5 people for my private sponsor group who live in different states across the United States? And the answer to that is no. You can have members of your group beyond the first 5 that are in other states. So you can have more than 5 members, and those members that live in other states can help in many different ways. However, the 5 people that you list on your application must live in or near the welcoming community where you plan to resettle the newcomer. The reason for that is that's just reality. There's going to be a lot of in-person support that's needed. So the 5 people that are listed on your application need to live either in the immediate community or within about 20 minutes of the community so that we know there's adequate support on the ground. The other thing that comes up a lot is 90 days really sufficient? Is that enough time for the family, for the newcomers to really stand on their own? And are we really only working with them for 3 months or 90 days? The reality will depend upon the family and their skills once they get here. But you will likely find, if you do research about getting them permanent housing that they have control over, that you'll have to co-sign on a lease. And often those leases are at least 1 year long. So you'll probably have a natural tie to the family for at least the first year. However, after those first 90 days, you want to begin having a regular conversation with the family about which things they feel comfortable doing independently and which things that you think they could be doing independently, and to start that conversation. So while the initial sponsorship period of 90 days is really intense and heavy, there's a lot of appointments, it turns into more of a mentorship after the first 3 months. So yes, the short answer is 90 days is not sufficient for somebody to get complete control of their lives, but it shouldn't be a full-on support situation after the first 90 days. We refer to that after the first 90 days as mentorship or strategic withdrawal. And you do that with the family and have a conversation with them. The last question is, we get a lot of questions after people start working on their welcome plan about the $2,475 per refugee that's required as a minimum. A lot of people do the research and find out that the security deposits alone on an apartment are going to cost more than that for each family. That is accurate. You're probably going to have to build a budget that is more than that minimum amount. However, we can't give you the answer as to how much you'll need for the family, because you all have to decide as a group how much you can fundraise, as well as how much you can get donated in terms of furniture and other items. But it's important to build a realistic budget and detail out all the one-time costs, as well as the ongoing monthly costs. It's also really, really important that you have actual conversations with the Department of Social Services to find out how long it's going to take for the cash assistance and the food stamps to get activated. Not how long they hope and they pray that it will happen, but in reality, how long it's taking for their agency to review and approve refugee applications. If that's going to take a month or two, you need to include an estimate of actually providing food and cash assistance for those first couple of months. Long answer, but the initial minimum amount is a bare minimum. You're going to need to build a budget that looks at the reality of the costs of doing this. I think that's it for now, Aaron.
You know, I'm going to add one more thing, that a question we get a lot whenever we do these sessions live is people want to know some questions like, can I sponsor more than one refugee? Or can I be a member of more than one PSG? Or a lot of people ask very specific questions. They say, well, my brother is in this country. Can he come through the Welcome Corps? Can my brother, my sister, my friend in this country or this situation come through the Welcome Corps? And the answer to all of those questions is we do not have the answer right now. Once again, we are all very excited and looking forward to phase 2 naming beginning. And once that begins, I want to repeat, on our website, there will be all new information, including the answers to those questions, something that tells you which refugees will be eligible for the program. We will also provide this webinar, but a brand new version of it, which will tell you about how to tell the government about the refugee you want to sponsor, how to put their name in the application. There'll be all kinds of new information provided in the application support webinar after the naming launches. So we want you to keep checking your email, keep checking the website for the new information. And that at that time, we will also be able to answer some of those other questions. And then lastly, thank you for watching this on demand. We hope you will share this video with other people who are thinking about sponsoring, including other members of your private sponsorship group. And we also, once again, encourage you, if you have questions, to reach out to your private sponsorship organization or contact us for a one-on-one meeting. Welcome Corps is a very exciting program, and we know that it is a program that is already bringing refugees to the United States. We already have people across America forming private sponsorship groups and welcoming refugees. And we know that more and more will come in the years to come. So thank you so much for being a part of this program and your interest in Welcome Corps. And we encourage you to work on your Welcome Corps application, do a good job with it, and feel free to watch this video over and over again when you have questions as you work on the application. Thank you very much for being a part of this, and good luck.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.